think too much about it. But in this last election, as I went into election day, totally apathetic. I'd even gotten involved in my local Republican Party in 2022 after being canceled by the woke culture on Facebook. I then got involved with my local Republican Party, but what I hated about it is it was so centralized. At the ground level, it's like if you don't think Trump is the greatest and totally support Trump, then, your opinion doesn't matter. And after all this time, I finally realized, which is crazy as a content creator, that I had hardly ever listened to you actually talk. Almost everything I had heard in years and years and years was clips on other media sources. Things like NBC, CBS, whatever, CNN, Fox News. Like, I had only ever watched clips of things taken, and then most of the talking.
I think it's very important to take note that he mentions Fox News in the sources. So the idea that he's trying to present is that he was presented a false image of Donald Trump from news media like Fox News. I mean, most of them were on the other side, shall we say, but he does mention Fox News. Fox News would have been sending him nothing but the opposite about how great Trump is. He's a wonderful guy. He's a wonderful leader. All the other media is just fake news. So how does him getting both perspectives completely opposite of each other mislead him into thinking that Trump's, I'm going to put words in his mouth, Trump's a buffoon, so I'm going to vote for Kamala, which he did. He claimed he voted for Hillary, Biden, and Kamala. How did he get tricked into voting for Kamala watching Fox News? They were ripping her apart and they were raising up Trump as a god. So explain that one. Comment below.
Was out of context. And the turning point for me is after the election, I went on Joe Rogan's podcast and I listened to your talk with Joe Rogan. And listening to you talk for several hours was very eye-opening. I realized that this idea I had of you was much different and was an idea that was kind of given to me by the media matrix or whatever you want to call it. That you as a person and what I had this idea of you were two very different things. And I also had the humbling realization, like, yes, if we have two choices for president, then it's like, can't we do better than this? Then it's still important for me to make the best choice I have among the options I have. My apathy going to the polls now, I voted for my governor, Ron DeSantis, and I voted mostly Republican, but I literally asked my wife before I went to the polls, who should I vote for? Because I was that apathetic, feeling like it didn't make a difference. And now I'm like, wow, like it does, even if all life offers you is one choice,
it almost sounds like he's indicating that he didn't actually vote for Kamala. I mean, he pushed the button or whatever. But did his wife actually vote for Kamala? Meaning he did it, but it wasn't his decision, it was hers. Interesting plot twist, shall we say.
Slightly better than another, that choice is worth making. And now I'm really happy that you got elected because I think the country's going in a much better direction. A lot of issues that I was unaware of, and I'd heard things talked about like, oh, the border and illegal immigrants. And in my mind, those were just talking points, things to, get attention and get media coverage. As, a YouTuber, I understand talking points to get coverage. But what I didn't see is the bigger picture. And when I listened to Joe Rogan and heard you talk about how the illegal immigrants come in the country and are brought in there intentionally to vote for the Democrats, I can't go. I maybe could look stuff up and try and get firsthand proof, but I pretty much have to take your word for it. But it does make sense with what I've seen. And now, like, the whole issue makes a lot more sense.
I dropped from 198 to 147.
It is like, well, Donald Trump just doesn't like people from other countries and is discriminating. And the way I see it now, it's like, that's not accurate. Like, I love the idea of having people just pay to come to the country. I think that would be a great idea. If you want to come to this country and you can afford to pay your way to be a citizen, I think we'd build a very prosperous country like that. I love the idea of cutting back government and cutting the waste. It's, between what you've done and Elon Musk, like, it's been shocking to see the level of waste that's in the government. And like, we all kind of knew this on some level, but as a regular person, you often don't really see how deep the waste goes, how much essentially money laundering there is of, people giving their friends huge amounts of money through the government. And I am intending to remember going forward, as someone who also has had thoughts of maybe one day I'll be president, that, in life, it's really important to listen to people themselves and make the best choices I can and not just get apathetic.
So, a couple of important points here. Observations. Notice that he even admits, this is very eye-opening. I mean, just to give you some context, this guy is someone who's been suffering, in my view, from some kind of mental situation for quite some time. He's admitted to having some substance abuse problems. I mean, he's definitely, to put it lightly, a little bit off his rocker, shall we say, just based on what he's been doing online, for sure. I mean, this guy is, to say he's scandalous, yeah, that's an understatement. But anyway, with that being said, notice what he says. And I think the simple-mindedness of him is actually beneficial, because he's saying too much, but it's sort of, it's enlightening, shall we say. He basically admits that he went to a car dealership, and the guy at the car dealership told him that actually Hondas suck. They're very unreliable. The reason people think they're reliable is because Honda spends a lot of money on marketing. All the people you hear saying how Honda's so great, they've just been brainwashed by the Honda ads. Right? Actually, the most reliable vehicle is the Land Rover. It's an excellent car. These cars run forever. I know many people that have 400,000 miles on their Land Rovers and it looks like it's brand new. I mean, these things are bulletproof. They literally never break. You can go to an average Land Rover repair shop and it's empty. A lot of them are closing down or going out of business. And he went in and he bought a Land Rover based on what that salesman told him. And as he's sharing this story with other people, he mentions, again, he's kind of the simpleton. He's saying too much. He mentions that, hey, I don't know if what this guy says was true about these cars never breaking down, and that the reason people think Honda is reliable is because of the marketing. I mean, I guess I could look into it, but I didn't really bother to look into it. But anyway, I had this impression of Honda that was totally based on all these ads and people telling me, and I never actually looked at Land Rover before. I never actually went to a Land Rover dealership and saw what Land Rover has to offer. But now that I have, and I realized, wow. So I'm happy I have a Land Rover, and it's a great car, and I wish I had checked them out earlier. That's what he basically said. He literally watched a podcast on Joe Rogan, and I guess he got a vibe, It's almost like that Bill Maher thing. Like, Bill Maher acted as if he thinks Trump is a monster. I mean, a literal monster. So him going to have dinner with him, he was supposed to, like, punch him in the face, or, Trump was going to jump on top of him or throw stones at him or something. And, he was shocked to find out that Trump is actually a human being who's capable of, moderating his conduct and having a little bit of complexity in terms of being one way, at one time and another way at another time, So in other words, this guy previously believed the absolute worst and most hyperbolic representation of Donald Trump, perhaps as literally Hitler or Hitler-esque, and certainly a monster. So he expected in that podcast for Trump to just be all crazy and attacking Joe Rogan, or I don't know, throwing the table over, or whatever extreme conduct. But instead he saw just a regular guy just talking about regular stuff, and make a little joke here, and Joe Rogan makes a little joke, and just kind of like chit-chatting, and like, not being overtly monstrous. And he's like, oh my goodness. It's like Bill Maher, who says he saw him laugh, or he saw him smile, or something like that. I mean, so he was unaware that Trump was capable of smiling. Now, again, just like I mentioned, it's like this guy, his image of Trump was based on the most extreme version that was presented to him. So there have been people in the media, maybe MSNBC, I've heard people make that ridiculous statement, and I admit I was kind of like, is that true? And I thought, I haven't really seen him smile, but then I'm like, no, I've actually seen him smile. I've seen him make jokes as well. I've seen him make humor in terms of self-deprecating humor about himself. He's done these things. I mean, it's rare, perhaps, but he's done it, right? So if you think that Trump is literally Hitler because you're such a simpleton, perhaps, then you would be shocked to see him on a Joe Rogan podcast, not literally killing somebody on the show and, throwing the table over and, just ranting and raving about eating babies. Now, those typical people who perhaps have an extreme level of disdain for Trump will say that he did rant and rave in the podcast, and I'm sure he said some crazy stuff in there, but because of his ability to manipulate emotions, and this guy not being the sharpest bulb, shall we say, I'm sure he didn't pick up on that stuff. He was getting into the podcast, and they were like, and he's sitting there like, oh, this is kind of cool, and he's like, oh, he actually took the time to come out to meet Joe Rogan, and he's talking normal stuff and saying stuff that kind of sounds sensible, and he's saying stuff, oh my goodness, the border, whatever, right? So caught up in those vibes, I'm sure the times when he was saying ridiculous things, this guy didn't pick up on it. So to him, it was a really good or fairly decent podcast, and made him sort of rethink what he thought about Trump previously. So this is a good, interesting thing to see that this is how some people think. Like they literally watch MSNBC and some of these partisan YouTubers, and they literally believe the most extreme version. Now, don't get me wrong. Trump is definitely very extreme, extremely dangerous, extremely unhinged, for sure. But as is always common in our American media, it's never enough. Trump could literally go around and, rape 2 women in the Democratic Party, and it comes out and it's full evidence and everything, and somehow the story would come out that actually looks like he might have raped 5, and the extra ones could be totally like made up or based on loose evidence. Like, it's bad enough that he did that to 2 women, but somehow that wouldn't be enough for our media. These independent guys, for sure, corporate news to a lesser degree, but they for sure would be jumping on any opportunity to go after him. So if you don't have any sort of critical thinking skills, and you're a bit of a simpleton like this guy, then you would believe everything they tell you, the most extreme version, and the most hyperbolic representation. So again, if you literally believe the most extreme version of Trump that's presented to you, then it's not shocking at all that watching that podcast would have been eye-opening, and you're like, man, he's actually kind of cool. Now, this is a more extreme example in terms of this guy, whatever he's got going on. But even for just normal people who, may not have issues like he does, but are not the biggest critical thinkers, how many of them went down the same rabbit hole that this guy did? Right? Just kind of rudderless past, voting based on how his parents voted and how people around him voted, and not really being engaged, and then running into the right video at the right time. In this case, the Joe Rogan podcast. I guess fortunately for Kamala, even though she didn't win, I guess he didn't watch it until after the election because he voted for Kamala, he says so. And now, even though he's as simple as he might be, he was smart enough to recognize that, hey, maybe I should look into these things, but yet he didn't. How many Americans are like that? Right? You're so focused on your life, your family, your goals, your struggles in life, that you don't have time to look into these things, right? You go over a general vibe, and if you're just going off of vibes, then I could see you in a blue area with a lot of liberal friends just being like, Donald Trump is a racist and he's Hitler, and whatever, the most extreme version, whatever people are saying, you just take it in like they're in your circle, so you're like, you accept it as reality. And since a good amount of that stuff is hyperbolic, right, but you're actually believing all of it, then when you actually see him for the real, for real, you're just kind of like, okay, I had a vision of him as Hitler, and now I'm seeing someone who, well, he's making jokes, he's smiling, he seems like, personable, whatever. How many millions of Americans fall into that category, and who voted for him based on that trajectory? How many former Biden voters, former Bernie voters voted for Trump in the last election based on a similar journey? I think the answer to that question might be a perfect example of you can't handle the truth situation. Or in other words, something that maybe you don't want to know the truth to that answer to that question. It might be a bit saddening, shall we say. Anyway, let me hear your thoughts. This is the Debate Me channel. Debate me in the comment section below. Click on the like button, subscribe, smash that bell. Be well.